Nobody touched the red emergency phone, but it rang anyway, once, then again, heavy and wrong in the quiet maples. It was September 17th, 2011, at Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, and the air had that early fall edge where the sun still feels warm, but the shadows don't. The call came through, as breathing at first, close to the receiver, then a calm male voice that used staff-only wording and asked for help at a closed trailhead like it was routine. 2-day hikers were already overdue, and I knew the search grid well enough to picture it with my eyes closed. I also knew the voice didn't belong to any coworker, and it didn't belong to any regular volunteer we trusted with the back roads. When I drove toward the closure, the gate chain was rehooked neatly, tucked the way only staff bothered to tuck it, as if someone wanted me to believe it had never been touched. On the trail, I found fresh boot prints that stepped off the path, stopped, and turned back in a perfect circle, like a demonstration. I found a backpack hung on a branch at chest height, straps looped carefully, not snagged, not accidental. Farther in, I found a colleague face down beside a service shed, eyes open, radio missing, like a hand had practiced the motion of taking it. When I ran for my truck, a man was waiting in the parking lot with his engine idling, smiling like he had nowhere else to be. Over the next 12 hours, I would learn what it feels like to be managed inside your own park, pushed one decision at a time toward the worst possible outcome. I'd keep my job because paperwork has rules, and because I lived long enough to write it down. I also learned that preparation looks a lot like intelligence when you're the one reacting. Let me tell you exactly how it went. At the time, I was 33 and working as a park ranger at the Porkies. I'd been there long enough to stop romanticizing the place, which is something visitors do because they see a photo of Lake of the Clouds and think the whole world up there is clean and simple. Most days were permits, trail checks, bear-proofing lectures, and the kind of small problems people bring with them into big woods. The danger was usually the boring kind: dehydration, a twisted knee, a bad decision made with a good phone battery, and too much confidence. That morning started with a missing persons call that wasn't even mine at first. It came from the front desk at the visitor center while I was sorting a stack of closure notices and trying to figure out which boardwalk sections were still safe to route people around. The clerk sounded tired in that way people do when they've already apologized 3 times to somebody in line. "They didn't come back to their car," she said. "2 of them signed the register yesterday afternoon. I asked for names, descriptions, where the car was parked, and what the register said they planned to do. I got the basics: Lydia Fenn and Eric Pruitt, Grand Rapids plates, mid-size sedan, day packs, no overnight gear listed, and a route that would have been easy if they stayed on it. The clerk added something small that mattered, a detail that wouldn't show up on a form. "They're not the only ones asking," she said. "A guy called early, said he saw 2 people off trail near Mirror Lake yesterday. He wouldn't leave his name." I told her to keep the car where it was, to stop anyone from touching it, and to politely keep the family or friends away from it if they showed up. I asked her to write down the caller's number if he called again, and I told her I'd be there as soon as I could. Then I pulled the register sheet myself and looked at the handwriting, not because it's magic, but because it gives you a human rhythm. Lydia wrote neat, careful letters. Eric's writing leaned hard right, like he was always halfway out the door. I was walking toward the map cabinet when the red emergency phone rang. It wasn't my handheld. It wasn't dispatch. It was the old hardline that fed into the county system and rang a unit phone on my desk. The kind of phone you forget exists until it reminds you. We almost never heard it outside of storms and downed lines, and even then, it usually rang for the wrong reason. I picked up, and for a second all I heard was breathing, slow, controlled, like the caller was counting. Then a man's voice came through, calm and flat, with no hurry in it at all. "Need a ranger at South Mirror," he said. "Service access is open." Service access was our phrasing for gates and roads the public wasn't supposed to use. A visitor could guess it, sure, but he said it like it belonged to him, like it was the obvious way to describe it. He didn't say trailhead. He didn't say parking lot. He said service access, and my skin tightened under the uniform. "Who is this?" I asked. He didn't answer the question. He spoke again like he'd been waiting for me to stop talking. "Bring your radio," he said. "Don't bring anybody else." Then the line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a beat and listened to the empty tone, the kind that makes you feel stupid for holding a piece of plastic like it's going to explain itself. The visitor center was bright and normal. A family was looking at a display about black bears. Someone's kid was tapping on the glass of a case like the world owed him noise, and I had a staff-only phrase in my ear from a man I didn't know. Tom Relling was at the map cabinet when I walked down the hall. Tom was older than me by about a decade and acted like it, steady and blunt, with that quiet authority that doesn't need a big voice. He wore his hat indoors because he didn't care what anyone thought about small rules. "You hear that phone?" I asked. He nodded once. Heard it. Kara Benton came in behind him, still in her seasonal uniform, hair pulled back, eyes alert in the way new rangers are before the job teaches them what people can be. She looked between us and took in our faces, which is a skill that matters in this work. Tom said, "We've got 2 overdue hikers and a strange call about South Mirror. We go together." Kara frowned. "South Mirror is closed for the boardwalk work, right?" "It is," I said, "which means somebody's paying attention." Tom opened the map cabinet and laid out the area like he'd done it 100 times, because he had. Mirror Lake, the spur trails, the service road that ran behind the closure, the pump house that fed water to a nearby facility, and the little pieces of infrastructure most visitors never see. The Porkies aren't just trees and cliffs. They're also gates, locks, sheds, culverts, and the kind of back-end maintenance network that can hide a person if they want to be hidden. I called dispatch and gave them a clean version of what we had: 2 overdue hikers and a need to verify a closure gate near the Mirror Lake area. Dispatch asked if we wanted county support, and I did what people do when they're trying to be competent. "Not yet," I said. "We're checking first." That was my first mistake, treating it like a problem we could solve in-house, like it was a lost couple who'd found the wrong trail and needed a ride and a lecture. The words, "service access is open," were sitting in the back of my head like a pebble in a boot, and I still tried to walk like nothing was wrong. We took 2 trucks. Tom drove the older one with the winch, because Tom always drove the older one with the winch. Kara rode with me. I had her bring a first aid kit, extra water, and our evidence bags, the small ones people think are dramatic until they're not. I also had her bring our printed closure schedule from the whiteboard, because I wanted to confirm what had been posted and when, and because some part of me already knew we were dealing with a person who cared about our routine. The drive out was quiet at first, then it got quieter, the way it does when the pavement ends and the woods start folding around you. September in the Upper Peninsula has a smell I still can't separate from that day: damp leaves, pine, and cold soil, with a faint sweetness where the maples are turning. The sky was clear, but the light under the canopy was flat, and it made every shadow look like a place something could stand. We reached the service gate around 9:10 a.m. A heavy chain wrapped the post. The lock was intact. That would have been reassuring if the chain hadn't been rehooked too neatly, the loose end tucked under itself like somebody cared about presentation. Kara leaned out her window and stared at it. "It looks staged," she said. Tom walked up, checked the lock without touching more than he had to, and held his palm out for quiet. He wasn't listening for an animal. He was watching the ground, reading it the way a mechanic reads an engine sound. Somebody had driven up, turned around, and left, and the tread marks were there if you knew how to see them. But the soil had been smoothed over in places with something flat, like a shovel blade or a wide board, the kind of thing you use when you want a mess to look like nothing. Tom looked down the service road, then back at me. "Somebody's playing games," he said. We parked where we could block the road without trapping ourselves, angled to leave fast if we had to. Tom logged the time, took a quick photo of the gate and chain with his work camera, and marked our position on the map. It sounds formal, but that's what keeps you from losing your mind later. You write it down. You make it real. You don't let the day turn into a blur you can't prove. Kara and I took the trail, while Tom stayed near the trucks to keep our exit clear and to watch the lot. He told us he'd walk a loop and check for the hiker's vehicle if it was in the area, because sometimes people park where they shouldn't and then act surprised when they can't find their own car. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. A quarter-mile in, we found the first thing that didn't belong. A day pack hung from a low branch, straps looped carefully, not tossed, not snagged. It was at about chest height, easy to see, like it wanted to be found. Kara stepped toward it like her body was trying to do the helpful thing before her mind caught up. I caught her elbow. "Don't." She stopped and looked at me, embarrassed, then serious. "Evidence?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, "or worse." Tom came up behind us a minute later, slow and tight, eyes tracking the brush line and the trail like he was counting angles. He didn't touch the pack either. He leaned in close enough to read the brand, the stitching, the dirt pattern. Then he looked past it down the trail. Boot prints cut off into the brush and made a clean circle, like someone had walked out, turned around, and walked back into the exact same track. Not wandering, not searching. A circle, a demonstration of control. Kara swallowed. Why would anyone do that? Tom didn't answer. He pointed at the pack with 2 fingers, like he didn't want his hand too close to it. That's not lost. That's placed. We backed up, marked the spot with a small strip of survey tape on a trunk, and moved on. I took out my phone and snapped a photo from a few angles without stepping into the prints. I didn't trust my own memory anymore, not with a staged gait and a voice on a red phone using our language. 10 minutes later, we reached the service shed. It sat just off the trail, plain and functional, where we kept lumber, fasteners, spare signage, and the portable closure boards. The padlock hung open, swinging slightly, as if it had been moved recently. Tom's jaw tightened. I locked that yesterday. Kara whispered, "Should we leave and call it in?" I wanted to. I also wanted to know where Lydia and Eric were, and I wanted to know why someone was pulling us deeper. People don't stage things like this for no reason. They stage things because they want a response. Tom said, "Stay here." He stepped toward the shed with the careful walk of a man who'd been around tools and trouble. I said his name, sharp, because something in me didn't like the way the door sat, half open like a mouth. "Tom, wait." He held up one finger without turning around. He pulled the door wider and leaned in, just a little, like he was checking for a raccoon or a missing sign. The next part happened fast, but it didn't feel fast. I saw Tom's shoulders tense. I saw his right hand move toward his belt like he'd been stung. Then he dropped, straight down. No stumble, no shout, like his body had been unplugged. Kara made a sound and clapped her hand over her mouth so hard her knuckles went white. I went low and moved fast, keeping the shed between me and the trail, because whatever did that to Tom had a line of sight somewhere. I reached for my radio and keyed up. "Dispatch, Ranger Unit at South Mirror," I said. "Officer down." Repeat, "Officer down." Only static answered, thick and ugly. I tried again on the alternate channel we used when the main one was crowded. Nothing but a faint hiss, like the world had been turned down and left there. I crawled to Tom and rolled him enough to see his face. His eyes were open. His chest didn't move. His skin already looked wrong, pale in the way it gets when blood stops doing its job. His radio was gone from his vest clip, ripped clean, like a hand had practiced that exact motion. I checked his neck and the back of his collar, expecting to find something obvious, and I found something that made my stomach tighten even more. Just under his collar line, there was a tiny puncture mark. No blood, no mess, just a dot like a thorn prick. It was too clean to be a branch. It was placed where his vest wouldn't protect him and where he wouldn't see it. Kara knelt beside me, shaking. "Is he—" I didn't give her a soft answer because softness makes people freeze. "Yes," I said. "He's gone." I dragged Tom behind the shed corner, not because it would help him, but because it would help us. I couldn't let Kara stare at him in the open, and I couldn't leave him where the person who did this could watch our reaction like entertainment. I glanced at the shed door again, and that's when I noticed the detail that turned fear into a colder kind of anger. The padlock and hasp were still there. The lock wasn't broken. Whoever opened it did it with a key. I said, "Back to the trucks, now." We moved fast, but not blind. I kept my eyes on the brush along the trail, and I kept us in the open when I could, because cover goes both ways. Kara kept looking back like she could will Tom to stand up and walk after us. I held her by the shoulder once and made her look forward. "Eyes up," I said. "You don't get to go numb yet." When the trucks came into view, relief hit me so hard it almost made me careless. Then I saw the pickup. A dark green truck sat in the lot that hadn't been there before, old and well-kept, engine running. The driver's window was down. A man rested his left arm on the door like he'd been waiting for a coffee order. He watched us like we were late. He called out, calm as a clerk, "You found him." Kara froze. I kept walking, because stopping in the open feels like offering yourself. My hand hovered near my holster without touching it. Touching it too early changes the whole conversation. I said, "Who are you?" He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "You should have come alone." He said it like a rule I'd broken, like I'd been briefed and ignored it. Then he lifted his right hand just enough for me to see what was in his lap. A handgun, low, not raised, but visible, a quiet promise. I took one more step and angled my body so Kara stayed behind my shoulder. "Put it down," I said. He shook his head once, bored. "Keys," he said. "Radio, both of them." My mind flashed to the shed and to Tom's missing radio and the fact that this man knew exactly what to demand. He didn't say wallet. He didn't say phone. He said keys and radio, the tools that let you move and speak. "You can't leave," I said, "because sometimes you say the thing you're supposed to say even when you know it's not true." He watched me for a beat, then said, "Watch me." He nudged the truck into gear like we were just another obstacle to roll around. I moved first. I drew, not to shoot him, but to force him to commit to a choice. He chose to fire. The shot punched into the dirt near my boot, not a warning, not a message, an attempt to end it. I shoved Kara behind my truck and dropped to a knee. I didn't fire back because I didn't have a clear lane and Kara was too close. The man backed up hard, gravel spraying, then swung around our trucks like he'd walked that lot in his head. As he passed, he leaned out and threw something. It bounced in the dust by Kara's feet. A key ring, Tom's ring. I recognized the tag we used for facility locks. The man drove off down the service road, and the gate chain rattled behind him. I watched the chain and felt my stomach drop because the chain was open. It had been open the whole time. The neat tuck wasn't reassurance. It was theater. Kara stared at the keys like they were alive. "Why would he throw them?" "Because he wants us to look," I said. "Because he wants time." I shoved her toward my truck. "Get in." We jumped in. I turned the key. The engine cranked, coughed, and died. I tried again. Crank, cough, dead. The dashboard lights flickered like a weak heartbeat. Kara's voice went thin. "What's wrong?" I popped the hood and knew immediately. The battery cable had been cut clean and folded aside like a neat repair job. Not yanked, not torn. Whoever did it had time, a tool, and a calm hand. He'd done it while we were on the trail. He'd stood right where I was standing now and worked like it was his own truck. Tom's truck started. I shoved Kara into the passenger seat and we took off in Tom's rig, my hands slick on the wheel, my mind running through maps like a card trick I couldn't drop. I keyed the dash radio again, hoping the higher wattage would punch through whatever was happening. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Unit. Officer down, shots fired. We need county and medical," I said. "We need response to South Mirror Service Gate." Silence. Kara stared at the radio like it had betrayed her. "Is it broken?" "No," I said. "Something's wrong with the repeater or somebody's blocking us." "Can he do that?" she asked. "A person can do a lot," I said, and I meant it in a way that wasn't comforting. We hit a bend where the woods tightened and the road dipped. Ahead, a fallen tree lay across the track, cut square like it had been measured, placed like a door being shut. I braked hard and stopped short enough to feel the seatbelt bite. Kara whispered, "He did that too." "Yeah," I said. "He's shaping where we go." Tom's truck had a winch, but the cable was missing, neatly unspooled and gone. I saw the hook bracket hanging empty and felt that same cold anger rise again. This wasn't improvisation. This was a plan with steps, and we were walking through them in order. We couldn't move the tree fast, not with one person shaking and the other watching the tree line for a man we'd already seen shoot without hesitation. So we did the only thing left. We left the truck and went around the blockage on foot, staying in the open where we could see each other, where we could at least pretend we weren't being hunted in cover. I grabbed the capsaicin spray from the door pocket and shoved it into Kara's hand. "Point and press," I said. "If he gets close, use it." Her eyes were wet. "I don't want to." "I don't either," I said. "Hold it anyway." We moved along the service road shoulder, where it narrowed into trail again, cutting toward the pump house we used to manage water for a nearby facility. If I could reach that building, I might reach a landline. If I could reach a landline, I could get 911, and if I could get 911, we wouldn't be alone in this puzzle anymore. Halfway there, my handheld crackled, and for a second, I felt relief like a punch. Then I heard the voice, not dispatch, not a unit. A man, calm and close, like he was standing next to the microphone. "Good choice," he said. "Pump house. You're thinking." Kara's face drained. "He's on our channel." I kept walking and forced my breathing to stay steady. Answering him felt like feeding him. Not answering him felt like pretending he wasn't there, and pretending gets you killed too. He spoke again, and this time his tone carried something almost friendly, like a coach. "Your friend in the shed is cold," he said. "The hikers are colder. You want to be next. Keep walking." I stopped and stared into the woods, trying to find him by willpower alone. "Where are they?" I asked, and I hated myself for asking because it was exactly what he wanted. He laughed once, short. "You don't bargain," he said. "You comply." We reached the pump house around 1:40 p.m. The door stood open. That alone told me it was a trap, because I'd been in and out of that building a dozen times and it was never left open. It was a simple place. Concrete pad, metal siding, a little overhang, and a cheap deadbolt that only worked if you used it. I stopped Kara with a hand across her chest. "We don't go inside," I said. She pointed, desperate. "The phone is in there." "I know," I said. "He wants us in there." I crouched and scanned the ground the way Tom would have, the way I should have been doing all morning. Fresh marks. A thin line in the dirt, too straight to be natural, running from the doorway to a stake hammered into the brush. A trip line, low enough to catch a shin, taut enough to do something when it snapped. Kara saw it too, and stepped back, breathing fast. "He's not smart because he's special," I said, and my voice came out flatter than I expected. "He's smart because he prepared." I backed away from the pump house and pulled Kara with me. We cut toward the closest public trail where we might meet other hikers, because more eyes and more noise can break a plan that relies on silence. We'd been alone too long already, moving through a set designed for us. When we hit the trail, we found the missing hiker's car key on the ground, placed on a flat stone like an offering. It was clean, upright, positioned so you'd see it. Kara stared at it like it was a message. "That's Lydia's?" she asked. "How do you know?" "I don't," I said. "I just know nobody drops a key like that." We moved toward a wider junction near the boardwalk area, the place where closures had been posted and where you could sometimes see people even on a slow day. Halfway there, I saw a shape ahead that made my stomach sink. A shoe, one shoe, upright, clean, like it had been set down as a marker. I raised my hand and stopped Kara. I moved up slow and found Eric Pruitt behind a low cedar, laid on his side, face turned away. No blood, no obvious injury, just a body that didn't move and a stillness that felt intentional. Kara covered her mouth, eyes bright with tears she didn't have time for. I checked for breathing and found none. I felt for a pulse anyway because your hands do what they've been trained to do, even when your mind already knows. I didn't let Kara kneel and touch him. I held her shoulder and made her look at me because if she broke there, we'd both break. "We leave him," I said. "We come back with help." She nodded too fast, like she'd agree to anything as long as we kept moving. We reached the junction and finally saw other people. A middle-aged couple with trekking poles, packs small enough for a day hike. Relief hit me so hard it almost made me careless. I raised both hands and walked toward them like I didn't have a gun, like I was just a ranger with news. "Turn around," I said. "Go back to the visitor center. Now, don't stop." The man frowned. "What's going on?" Kara stepped forward. "Please," she said. "Just go." Before they could argue, the green pickup rolled into view on the service spur behind them, slow and smooth like it belonged there. The driver leaned out and called, "Folks, the trail's closed. Rangers said to come with me." He used the exact tone people obey, the confident voice of authority that gets you into trouble if you trust it in the wrong mouth. The couple looked between us, confused. I saw them trying to choose the easiest truth, the uniform, the truck, the calm voice, the part of the brain that wants this to be normal. "Do not go with him," I shouted. The man in the truck lifted his handgun, not at them, at me. He didn't wave it. He didn't posture. He presented it like a fact. "Pick," he said, quiet. I understood. If I rushed him, he'd shoot them. If I didn't, he'd take them. Either way, he'd get to watch us react. I grabbed the woman's arm and shoved the couple off the trail toward open ground where they could run. "Run," I said. "Don't look back. Go to the visitor center." They hesitated, then moved, awkward and panicked, trekking poles clattering. The man in the truck fired once, and dirt kicked up near my knee. Kara screamed, a raw sound that made my heart slam harder. I raised my weapon and fired 2 shots into the truck's front tire, not at the driver, the tire. The rubber collapsed with a hard slump. The truck swerved, slowed, then stopped at an angle like a wounded animal. The driver didn't panic. He opened the door and stepped out, gun in his hand, moving like he'd done this before. He didn't look at Kara. He looked at me, and he smiled like we were doing a drill. "Smart," he said. "You're still dead." He advanced, steady, using the truck as partial cover until he didn't need it. I backed up, keeping distance, keeping Kara behind me, my mind racing through the map again. Boardwalk, marsh, open sight lines, no trees close enough for him to vanish in 2 steps. "Kara," I said, "go." She shook her head hard. "I'm not leaving you." "Go to the visitor center," I said. "Get help, now." He lifted the gun, and in that instant Kara moved, not away, but toward him with the spray can raised like it was a fire extinguisher. She hit him in the face with a solid stream. He jerked back and blinked hard, gun arm lifting in a wild angle. He fired, and the shot went wide, cracking into a dead log. I rushed him and drove my shoulder into his chest. We hit the ground hard enough to knock the air out of both of us. The handgun skidded away into the grass, and for a second, the world narrowed to weight and breath and the smell of pepper spray on my own skin. He fought like a man who'd been saving his strength all day. He clawed at my belt. He tried to grab my holster. His hands were strong, and his face was tight with rage that didn't match his calm voice. I pinned his wrist and slammed his hand into the dirt until his grip broke. Then I used my knee to keep his hips down the way we're taught. The way you do when you don't have cuffs and you're trying not to die. Kara found the dropped handgun first. She didn't point it at him like a movie. She pointed it at the space between him and me, shaking so hard I thought she'd drop it. "Stop," she said. "Stop." He spat, blinking, face wet, and he looked at her like she'd insulted him. "You don't even know how many," he said. "How many what?" I snapped, because anger is sometimes the only thing that cuts through fear. He smiled through the sting and the dirt. "How many took your trails and didn't come back?" he said, like it was a private joke. Then he did something I still replay. He went limp for half a second, like he'd accepted losing, and in that half second, I felt my balance shift. He twisted, slipped free, and sprinted toward the trees, half blind, still fast. He didn't run like a panicked man. He ran like he'd already chosen his route. I chased him 2 steps, then stopped at the edge of cover. Running into thick brush after an armed man is how you become a report someone else writes. I stayed at the tree line and watched him angle toward the boardwalk area where the marsh begins, where footing is deceptive and sight lines open. He hit the boardwalk, stumbled, and cut off it onto the marsh edge like he thought he could disappear in the reeds. His foot sank, then sank again. He fought it, arms windmilling, and for the first time his calm cracked. He looked back at me and his eyes were wide now, not bored anymore. I stopped 10 feet away and didn't step closer. "Stay still," I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. He tried to crawl and the mud took him deeper. His hands slipped. His mouth opened like he wanted to shout, but what came out was a thin sound that didn't carry. He sank to his knees, then lower, and then he was still, chest pressed forward as if the ground had decided to keep him. Kara came up beside me, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. "Is he gone?" she asked. "I don't know," I said, and I meant it. The marsh can swallow a man, but it can also hide one. I watched for movement. I watched for bubbles. I watched for the simplest lie, a hand rising, a shoulder shifting. The surface stayed quiet. We didn't celebrate. We didn't stand there like it was over. We turned and moved because Tom was dead, Eric was dead, Lydia was still missing, and we still couldn't talk to dispatch. The park felt enormous in a way it never had before, because a single person had turned our systems into props. We headed toward higher ground, toward any ridge or overlook where a phone might find a weak bar of service. We stayed on wider trails when we could. We avoided blind corners. We listened for engines and for footsteps. We found the couple again later, miles away, exhausted and wide-eyed. And they told us the man in the green truck had called after them once, in a perfect imitation of a ranger's authoritative voice, telling them they were off route and needed to come back. They'd kept running because my tone had been uglier, and fear recognizes fear. The sun slid lower, and the woods shifted with it. Shadows lengthened and the air cooled. We checked our water, checked each other's hands for tremors, and kept moving. At one point, my handheld crackled again, and for a second I heard what sounded like dispatch, my name, my unit number, the exact cadence. Then it broke into static, and underneath it, I heard the man's voice again, softer now, almost amused. "You're doing great," he said. "Keep walking." I wanted to throw the radio into the woods. Instead, I turned it off, because I'd learned enough by then to stop feeding him our reactions. We finally caught a thin bar of service near a more open stretch, close enough to a high point that the phone stopped being a brick. My hands shook when I dialed, and I remember spacing the numbers in my head like it mattered. 911. The call went through at 8:58 p.m. When the operator answered, I talked fast and clean. Officer down, multiple victims, suspect armed, interference with communications, and I gave landmarks that could be found in the dark. I stayed on the line until I heard the first sirens on the access road. Then I didn't feel relief so much as exhaustion so deep it felt like sickness. County deputies arrived first, then medical, then state investigators. They treated Kara for shock and checked me for injuries I hadn't noticed until my adrenaline faded. Scraped knuckles, bruised ribs, a raw throat from breathing pepper spray residue. They sent teams to the shed and to Eric immediately. They brought lights that made the woods look harsh and unreal. I walked them to Tom. I walked them to Eric. I showed them the pump house trip line and the cut tree and the empty winch bracket. I handed over Tom's keys, and I told them about the puncture mark under his collar. A medic confirmed it, small and precise, and the state investigator's face tightened in a way that told me he understood exactly what kind of person does that. They found Lydia before midnight in a shallow space under a closed picnic shelter, hidden behind stacked lumber from the boardwalk work. No blood, no obvious trauma, just a body placed out of sight, like a man storing something he didn't want found too soon. The deputies didn't let Kara see her, and I was grateful for that small mercy. The green truck was found later, abandoned on a service spur with its headlights off. The suspect wasn't in it. The marsh hadn't kept him the way I'd wanted it to. There were tracks in the mud leading out to firmer ground, and that was the moment the day gained its final weight, because it meant the sinking scene wasn't an ending. It was another maneuver. Inside the truck, investigators found Tom's radio and a set of copied keys that fit our locks. They found a folder of printed forms from our office, including blank permits, closure notices, and a staff schedule that had been taken right off our board. There were notes in the margins in small, careful handwriting, gate numbers, shed locations, times when ranger trucks were usually parked, like someone doing homework. One thing sat on top of the folder, placed like it wanted to be seen. A backcountry registration card filled out in my handwriting, with Lydia and Eric's names written under it. I stared at it under the investigator's flashlight until my eyes hurt. I hadn't written it. I hadn't signed it. Still, it looked like me. The slant, the pressure, the way I crossed my sevens, the way my capital letters leaned like they were trying to stand up straighter than they needed to. That was the part that stayed with me more than the gun, more than the staged bootprint circle, more than the red phone ringing with nobody there. A man had come into our park and learned our systems, then learned us, right down to the way we made marks on paper. He hadn't just studied the Porkies, he'd been practicing being one of us.